When you think about politics, what comes to mind? For most people, things like country affairs and the economy come to mind. But I can bet you that one of those things would not be an online video game, especially one like TF2. But the thing about politics is that it's not just limited to the government. In reality, politics exist wherever there's power. And by power, I mean influence, getting people to do things for you. And so now you might ask, okay, so what does this mean for TF2? What part of the game has some odd politics? And to tell you the truth, the game inherently doesn't have anything to do with odd politics at all. Rather, those odd politics exist outside of Team Fortress 2. And what I mean is that it all revolves around the workshop community for this game. Yet it's one of the most unique and most odd things that you will ever find in gaming. Something that has existed ever since the creation of the TF2 Workshop. And it could even be argued ever since the mapping tools for TF2 became available, and that the workshop just exacerbated things. But I do want to make one thing very, very clear. This video is not an expose, nor is it made with the intent to raise any kind of drama. This video is merely made to bring something up to the forefront that has been pretty much under everybody's noses who plays Team Fortress 2 casually. And some people might consider it a virtue, while others consider it something negative about the TF2 community. Either way, what the heck am I talking about? Well, if you've ever been a part of any kind of community on the internet, then you know that there always exists some form of hierarchy. Those at the top with the most influence and those at the bottom with the least. Those with ideas at the top usually have the most influence over people, which means that they have the most power. They can influence the most change. And those at the bottom of the totem pole have little to no influence, which means they can't change anything. They have no power. And that's how power works in most online communities. Most of the time, that power is intangible. It doesn't exist. It all depends on the relationship between users. So, for example, let's say that in your community you have an idea. Let's say you want to promote touching grass. If you're at the bottom of the hierarchy with no friends at all, with nobody who can push that idea with you, then you're out of luck. However, if you're one of the top members of the community, promoting that idea becomes so much easier. And that's because you have other people that you can convince to push that idea for you. You could have someone that you know that runs a newsletter to push that idea through emails. You can tell the community member who runs a website of the community that gets thousands of hits every single day to maybe run an ad or two that shows your idea in full view. You could possibly get somebody who runs a Discord server to have everybody change their bios to say, "I love touching grass." Point is that your idea is going to reach so much farther because you have other people to do that for you. That's power. And the brutal, honest truth is that without power, you cannot change anything. Which is a quote that comes from this pretty cool video from CGP Grey, which I highly recommend. Getting back to TF2 though, TF2 has something a little bit different. Because unlike most online communities, TF2's power is tangible. It's something that can be used as leverage to influence change, specifically change in TF2. And I really do mean the game itself. And of course, that's with the workshop. The power here doesn't rely on influence. Instead, that power relies on whether or not you can get an item or a map accepted into the game, because you get a pretty penny from Valve in cold hard cash. That's right, if you get an item accepted into the game, then you can earn actual money. And honestly, who wouldn't want that? But now you might be a little bit confused because the workshop itself doesn't have a hierarchy. The workshop is supposed to work through a voting system. It's supposed to be done in this democratic meritocracy, where good items get upvoted and those that get the most upvotes get accepted into the game, right? And on paper, that would be correct. I mean, that's how it's presented, that's how it is on the surface level. However, things rarely work out like they do on paper. Because what doesn't get mentioned is just how Valve picks their maps. And it's not done through the voting system. Sure, the voting system increases your chances by having better exposure and reaching the TF2 developers. However, that's not the only way that you can get exposure. Because beyond the workshop, there exist communities specifically for getting items accepted into the game. The two most notable are TF2 Maps and the TF2 Emporium. TF2 Maps being for, of course, TF2 Maps, and the Emporium being for TF2 items. This is where the hierarchy lies, and where most of that power in the TF2 Workshop community resides in. And surprise, surprise, those who have the most influence are the ones who have already gotten items accepted into the game. Because, to rip the band-aid off, the TF2 developers have a habit of choosing the same people when accepting items. Not all the time, of course, it's mostly just a trend, but it makes sense. If you've already gotten items or a map accepted into the game, then more than likely, the next items or map that you make are going to be of high quality. It means a lot less work from the TF2 developers having to do bug fixes or updates to items once they get put into the game. In short, it just means a lot less work. And especially now where TF2 is pretty much in this neglected state, it's definitely beneficial for both sides. And of course, those who run the websites and the Discord servers tend to have really good connections with those who have gotten items accepted into the game, which of course puts them square at the top of the totem pole. And this power has been used one way or another to set the ways that things have to be done. Now, I'm not going to give any actual opinions about whether or not these things have been done correctly, morally, ethically, in any kind of way or like that. But what I will say is that this hierarchy that exists really defeats the original purpose of the workshop, as it was supposed to be this democratic meritocracy where people would just submit items and then have people voting on them with minimal filtering done by Valve. And by minimal, I just mean that, they just check whether or not the item fits the game, whether it works inside the game, is it copyrighted, that kind of stuff. And for most people, that's how they view the workshop. They think that's how it works. But obviously, it doesn't. I mean, you don't have to know specific people in order to get an item or a map accepted into the game, but it definitely boosts your chances by a considerable amount. Especially considering the fact that TF2 Emporium and TF2Maps.net are the biggest community hubs in TF2. If you got a good relationship and good reputation with those two community hubs, the chances of your item or map getting accepted into the game grows exponentially greater than you trying to do it on your own. And of course, I gotta reiterate this thing, it's not entirely a bad thing. And this isn't just me trying to save my own ass or something like that because of whether or not I want to have a good relationship with these community hubs. It really doesn't matter. I'm never gonna get a map accepted into the game, and I don't do TF2 items at all. Sure, I've dabbled a bit here and there, but that honestly doesn't amount to anything. What I am trying to say, though, is that in some way these communities have just taken up the mantle of the work that Valve should be doing, and yet they aren't. So the community naturally takes the reins and does the job for them. Whether or not they're doing a good job about it is honestly up to you. But I also can't just sit here and pretend that nothing controversial has ever come out of this. Things like that are just bound to happen whenever we have a situation like these. And to be brutally honest, you really can't blame anybody but Valve, because instead of following their own rules and following the system that they implemented the way that most people view that system to work, you now have the community taking full reign of how things work, which only leads to more community infighting, which is overall a negative thing to happen. Because like most squabbles in regards to communities, there is a clear divide from the haves and the have-nots. And by having Valve neglect the game as they do, it only adds fuel to the fire, which causes even more infighting, which causes more drama, and makes the community a generally negative space. So, in conclusion, TF2 has some very odd politics that come out of the workshop community and through that process of getting items accepted into the game. With Valve neglecting that process, it has caused the community to take the reins and develop their own hierarchy and power that heavily influences how items are accepted into the game, which in a process where you can make real life money out of those items, becomes a very huge leverage opportunity to extend power and reach and lead to exploitation of the system, something that anybody could have told Valve was inevitable. It would be nice for things to be done in a certain way that is the most fair and the least reeking of favoritism and nepotism. But this all lies with Valve, who has accepted to neglect the game, which leaves the community to handle it all for them. And whether or not it's been good or bad is completely up to you. But I can't be the only one who wishes things were a little bit different. But now I want to hear from you. What's your opinion on all this? Did you know that something like this existed at all? Are you happy how things are being handled right now, or did you wish that the workshop was more fair? Please leave your opinion down in the comment section below. If you found this video interesting, like it if you liked it, dislike it if you disliked it. If you'd like to see more videos just like this in the future, make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to support me, I do have a Patreon and channel memberships, as well as super thanks enabled. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much to my supporters. I will catch you guys on the next one.